Good evening to each one of you. It's a pleasure to have you all with us for the session on logbook. Dr. Himashri ma'am and myself have tried to put this together for you with the help of all our co-facilitators, and we really enjoyed doing it. I hope you all enjoy the session too. As we move to the second slide. Okay, I think this difficulty of moving the slide has come up again. Okay, has the slide changed?
Yes, madam, it has changed.
Okay, so all of us who are familiar with this logbook guidelines will realize that a lot of details have been given in this, which we would like to imbibe, and we would try to see that we try to put our logbooks for the various colleges in place using these guidelines. So basically what we would like to do is the objectives for our session today would be try and get the intricacies of the logbook understood by all of us, and also understand the various related terms which have been used throughout in the logbook guidelines. So at the end of the session, we would try to achieve these objectives. If you reflect on the word log, that is part of the logbook, you would realize that as a noun, it basically just means an official record of events. And when we say to log, it is basically to enter either an incident or a fact in a systematic record. Now, this is as per the dictionary explanation. But when we look at the logbook guidelines, it has given us a very important definition, wherein every word seems to be having a lot of meaning. It says it is a verified record of the progression of the learner, documenting the acquisition of the requisite, either the knowledge, skills, attitude, and or competencies. Now, the key words out here are, one is, of course, it's a record, but it's a verified record. Now, that becomes very important because this is what it's going to go through. It's going to be verified by the faculty, and finally, it's going to be submitted to before the examinations as part of the requirement. The other word is progression. Now that tells us that it's not just a one-time thing that, okay, it has to be done right now, but they can learn the skills over a period of time and various levels can be achieved, and its progression is what is going to be documented. And the other word is acquisition. That is when we say that yes, the student, the learner has acquired whatever we want them to learn. So that's why the definition becomes very important to understand the various keywords in this. And there is another term which comes up, that is the portfolio. Now, while logbook is told that it's going to be mandatory, portfolio is something that would be a desirable document. It's basically an evidence of events that are documented in the logbook. So the logbook would have more of the entries of the activities, whereas the portfolio would have its details. So selected assignments can be entered into the portfolio also, and it could include work-based and in-training formative assessments, as well as reflections and learning from planned activity in the curriculum. So this can serve as an annexure to the logbook and can be utilized. So we would again come back to portfolio at the end of the session. One important aspect that keeps putting us in a dilemma at this phase is, for a logbook, should we go in phase wise or should we go in subject wise? Now, for the MBBS course, we have the first phase, the second phase, or the third phase. Either we call it the first prof, second prof, or the third prof. Now, we could have a logbook just for phase one and have it combine all the subjects together, or we could have it as a separate subject wise, like in the first phase itself, we could have a separate logbook for anatomy, separate for biochemistry, and separate for physiology. Now, when we go across and we try to look at various colleges, it's been seen that we have found both formats that are being used. If you look at the Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences or even the NTR University of Health Sciences, they have utilized a phase-wise logbook for the first phase, wherein they have combined all the three subjects. Of course, the logbook would have its sections, but all those three are in one logbook itself. Now, this could have its own advantage, because maybe you don't have too many books to take care of. You just have everything compiled in one book. The disadvantage could be maybe when you're trying to get the assignments corrected, it would be moving from one department to the other, and that may take time. If a student has submitted it in one subject, to get it back and to go to the other department maybe would take a little time. So each one of it has its own advantages and disadvantages. So as people use it, they would realize its benefits. The MUHS university, what they have done is they have gone subject wise. If you see, we have a separate logbook for anatomy, separate for physiology, and separate for biochemistry. Our college at Goa Medical College also, we have gone subject wise. So this gives a little advantage because each department can take care of their own records, and they have a first-hand access to the logbook. So it would a period of time would tell us which would be really very beneficial. But both have its advantages and both have some disadvantages that would be there. Now, as far as we are concerned, that is community medicine, we would definitely be a subject wise, because we can't have it combined in the phase 3 with the other subjects like medicine and surgery. So we would have it for our subject separate. So that is quite clear. We run across all phases, right from first year to the third year. So this again gives us an option whether we would like to go in for uh, having a logbook for each phase separately in our own subject. So in community medicine itself, we can have 3 logbooks, one for each phase. That's one way of going about it. Or we would have one logbook that would take us right from the first year to the third year. Now, AIMS Hyderabad, I suppose, is going in for one for each phase, whereas some other colleges, including ours, we are trying to move towards the uh, logbook, which is only one logbook for all the phases. So this part that is mentioned about whether it's going to be for phases separately or for subject is left to the university and the individual institutions. This is the verbatim paragraph taken from the logbook, and it tells us that there can be a logbook for each phase which must be submitted before the examination and available for the university examiners. So here is the catch for us. Now, if we want to have community medicine, the foundation course entries, if we try to do it in our logbook in the community medicine, since this will have to be submitted for the first prof examination, it would be difficult for us to have it in our logbook unless we are having it a phase wise. So what we would be more comfortable looks like is the foundation course entries can be done in the first year, the foundation course logbook that is being made by the institute along with the first year subjects. Whereas for us, what is mentioned here is if the subjects are included in more than one phase, the subjects can have a logbook covering various competencies or activities in all phases. So they have given us a guideline, but what suits the institute has to be decided upon as a consensus with various faculty in the department, and then a decision needs to be taken. The competencies addressed during the foundation course also need to be entered in the logbook of the first year profession. This is what I was trying to explain, that we also have some representation in the foundation course, like we have the community visits, we have 8 hours over there. So those entries possibly we would have to make in a separate logbook along with the first year course, right? So the other caution that we need to see out here is let's go slow on the logbook. It's the first thing that we may try to do is try to put everything that we are taking into the logbook, but that is not what is advised. Even if you see the logbook guideline, they have clearly mentioned that while it's tempting to enter the acquisition of each and every competency in the logbook, it will definitely sort of lead a drain on the faculty time and is to be best avoided. So if we try to go overboard of trying to make all the entries in the logbook, it will be a real workload that would increase, and that too for no reason. So we need to be very judicious about what we want to enter in the logbook and what exactly we would like to record. So what is recommended is the knowledge part or the know-how part can be skipped, and mostly the show or the show-how can be utilized to be entered into the logbook. Now, this also we can choose. Even in the phase one, if we have just two competencies that we choose that we are going to be entering, is good enough. It is not that we would like to have almost everything. We can choose the activities that we need to do, and even a few of them, if selected, are enough. It is not that we need to have many of them. The other important aspect that we need to remember is it has got an importance with the internal assessment. So we have to be very particular about how we are going to do the entries and verify them, assess them, because this will have a representation in the internal assessment. Now, the other aspect that we always have a point is, I suppose as of now, everybody would be going in for a print logbook immediately. But it's very nice to see that many colleges have also tried to initiate e-logbooks. So that's the electronic format of the logbook. And we have tried to get a demonstration for you where we have used the Government Medical College Bhavnagar website, courtesy Dr. Chinmay Shah, who gave us the access to it. And we have prepared two videos. Dr. Parag sir and myself have prepared two short videos, which we would like you to just have a look as to how you can go about it. The point that we are trying to put across here is that when you say e-logbook, it looks like, oh my God, how are we ever going to do it? We don't have that kind of a support. We don't have that resource. We don't have a great IT team. What we're trying to show you is it is feasible, it is possible. And if we try to work towards that direction, it will definitely, open a window for us where we can try to electronically have all our records in place, which will maybe make it more easier for us in the long run to keep such a large amount of data which is there. Now, since the video may not play on the slide out here, I will just attempt to play it once. If not, I will play it from the video directly.
Uh, Madam, the audio is not coming.
Yeah, is the audio visible?
No, it's not coming. Okay, we can stay on the slide, ma'am.
Okay.
So if I can resume from here.
Okay, 1 second. I'll just put it on the slideshow. Yes. Dr. Parag would take you through this video and explain to you about how they could make the entries from the teacher's point of view.
Thank you, ma'am. So this is the teacher's login, how it appears on the web page. This application is available on mobile as well for both the teacher as well as the student. So this is how the dashboard looks like when the teacher logs in. On the left hand panel, you see multiple options, and we would enter the teacher option in detail, the field where it mentions teacher. So as we go in, multiple options would appear. And fortunately, Bhavnagar Medical College has provided different options. And this is not only for logbook, but this is an entirely learning management system that they have developed for themselves. They have opened it up for so it would be available for the others as well. So now as we are going in the details, the second last option is manage the logbook, and once we click it, logbook format would appear. So this is how it appear to a teacher, and we will need to select the phase, whether we are going to do first MBBS and then the subject N. There are also multiple options such as all subjects or ADCOM or early clinical exposure, or whether it's regarding community visits and so on. So logbook also they have divided into multiple parts, and once we press search, these are the entries which are done by the students. So entries are done by student named Chinmay Shah, and the teacher can click on the plus sign on the left end of those entries and open it up in more details. So these would be the entries which the students would have already done. So once a teaching learning session in small group has already happened, then all the students are requested to fill in their logbook entries, maybe in the mobile. And once the students do them, it would be available. It would appear on the teacher's screen, and then the teacher would be able to edit them. So this is what e-logbook entry would look like on the screen. The upper 9 fields are what the students would have filled already, and the lower half fields are what the teacher is supposed to be filling. So that's the difference. So many of the things the students is already would have already pre-filled, so the teacher need not enter so many fields. There is a button also for portfolio entry. So if there is something, a photograph taken or a reflection written in detail or something else, there where is a separate file is required, can be put there. And then attempt at the activity could be first, repeat or remedial. Rating could be below meets expectation or above expectation. And then the decision of faculty, whether it's completed, repeat attempt or remedial, is to be given. And then the faculty's name and initial choosing the date when the teacher uh, gives this rating and signs the logbook electronically. So there is a date format as well, and remarks if anything needs to be put. The teacher can put remark, and this could be a feedback to student as well, and that would be documentation of feedback. Status is for the technical team, so we'll leave it untouched for the moment. So this is how once the teacher submits, uh, it would look like. So once we go back to selecting all those phase, subject, and the things, and then now, so the entry now, the last two columns says the decision of the faculty is that this activity is completed, and initial and date. So this is how the teacher version of the logbook would look like. So this is with regard to how it looks to the teacher's version. We can move to the student's version now. We can pause it and move to the next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Parag, for the explanation as to how a teacher would be maintaining the logbook from their end. Now we would like to show you how the student would be going about with the entries as far as their logbook is concerned. So a student would be provided a student ID and a registration. So once they get into the registration, this is the website of the Bhavnagar Medical College. So when we go to the in the E section of it, we see that the page which says that available courses. So when we go to the drop down menu, we have the My Logbook. So when we go to the logbook, when we open, this is how we get, it says that add new competency. Now when I click on the new competency over here, we will get an option as to what is to be entered. Now, since suppose I am a medical student of the first year MBBS course, so I select the course first MBBS. I have learned it in say anatomy, so I choose anatomy, and the activity item that was done was say an ECE. The competency that was addressed would be AN 1.2, and the name of the activity could be maybe a hospital visit that was made into the OPD, and I have an option of a calendar out here where I can enter the date. Say it was done on the 19th of November, and the components that of the activities would be maybe uh, observe the examination of a case of Parkinsonism, suppose. So this is, I would type it into that, and here I have another option of link of the portfolio. And suppose I want to write my reflections about what I found during that ECE, then I could add it here in a file, and I could put a link of the file over here. So once the link is clicked, it would be leading it to the portfolio. I also have an option to see here whether I have received feedback or not. So if I have received feedback, I would put it as yes. If not, it would be no. And I add the competency. So once our competency has been added, I can even go back to it and have a look. So I look at the course, the first MBBS, the anatomy subject, and I search for the competencies. I will see that the competencies are seen here, and what we look at is the whole chart which is available, and this is the entry that we have made now. If you look down, hospital visit to the OPD, it's done on 19th of November. Now these part which are the blanks would be filled by the teacher, and here I have said I have received feedback, I have written my components of activity, any other remark. If there was a link to the portfolio, I would have put it here, and I can always edit it whenever I want to. So this is how I can maintain my own entries in the logbook. So it is a beginning that they have done, and they have tried to put systems in place. It's in the trial phase, and they would be launching it. I suppose they've already started it, but they would do it full-fledged in the near future. So the point is they have tried to make this in-house. They have not bought any separate system or something. They are trying to build it themselves. So there are many colleges like this which are trying to get this initiative in place, and logbooks may soon become very common also. Now, at this juncture, I would like to take a slight pause, and if all of us realize before this logbook has come in, it's not that we were not recording our things. We were also having things recorded, that various activities that were being done. So if anybody of you could either raise your hand and share as to what are the existing systems that is being followed in the college before the CBME came in. You could either put it into the chat, or you could raise a hand, and I request Dr. Parmita to see if there's anybody who's raised hand so that they can be unmuted. You could also put it into the chat, which Dr. Parmita ma'am can read out to us. Basically, how are you maintaining records in your college presently for your subject, that is community medicine? What is being maintained before the CBME came in? Is there anybody who's putting it in the chat?
Madam, Dr. Vikram Gupta has raised hand.
Okay, can you unmute him?
Yes, I'm unmuted. Sir, if you wish to share anything, you can unmute yourself and share.
We would like to listen to you, Vikram sir. Have you unmuted the mic?
Yes, yes. Hemangini madam, I'll just unmute him. Yes, I've unmuted him, but
the others can be, in the meantime, even put their messages in the chat.
there seems to be some problem.
Okay, is there anybody else? All of us must be maintaining a system in our colleges for our subject. So, in fact, we were just wanting to know which are the various ways in which you're doing it. Any other hand raises, Dr. Parag?
Ma'am, some of the things have come up on the questions.
Okay.
Do you want me to read them? Many of them, in fact, have come on the questions.
Yes. Okay, I was checking the chat. Right.
Yes, I also that's
I can see it now. Yes, this. Okay. Yeah, you could read some of them, Dr. Parag.
Yes. Dr. Amrita mentions that we have a logbook hard copy already. So she has already logbook being maintained in her college. Then
Okay.
Dr. Kokila mentions that Spotta's case is presented, entered in a record logbook. That's what is practiced in her college. Dr. Amrita has
Record notebook,
clarified.
yeah.
Yes, Dr. Amrita has clarified that student record entry activity of clinical posting in the aforesaid logbook and practicals. So probably the practical record book is what probably she is referring to. And Dr. Kokila
Yes.
has mentioned that the family visit surveys are also being maintained. Dr. Christina writes that we have been maintaining formative assessment cards and record books as well. So a formative assessment card is
That's very
probably something which is
interesting.
something new.
Oh,
Record in journals is what Dr. Jyoti mentions. So that goes by the name journal. We do it with routine hardbound logbooks. They are filled by students and evaluated by faculties from time to time. That's what Dr. Varun mentions. Uh, our logbook is semi-structured, is Dr. Amrita is clarifying. And then there are two more comments. Dr. Srividya mentions that can we replace record with logbook, or is it good to keep them separately? Suggest please.
okay, that would be part of a separate discussion. Thank you, Dr. Parag. What they have put across is very true. We all have been recording it in some form or the other. And if we see, it is these are the various formats in which we have been maintaining it. Like somebody put it across just now saying that they maintain a record book. In our college, we have something called as a journal. There is another college that told me that they call it a manual. In AIMS, where my son studies, they call it a workbook. So it's the the point is that we are all recording it. So can we call that as a logbook? As per the definition, if you try to recollect, we are verifying it to some extent. We do check it and we sign it. But do we record and check for the progression? Do we check that whether it has been acquired? These are the things that we are not really doing in our existing system. That is why we need to revamp our system in such a way that we have the logbook maintained separately. So a logbook would be a separate document which we would maintain, and all these other existing systems we will have to decide on how we are going to continue it by maybe modifying it to a certain extent. And this could serve as a say a journal come portfolio and help us to record the details of the entries that are being made in the logbook in addition to other activities that are being done. So these things can be sort of modified into a portfolio also. Now, what we need to again remember as the salient features is not all elements of the competency need to be addressed by an activity. It's not that for every competency there will be some activity that we will be doing. At the same time, to achieve one competency, we may need to have multiple sessions. It may not be there in one session itself, or for sometimes it may not be there even in one phase itself. Maybe from phase 1 we start with the basics, and as they go to phase 3 we see that it increases in complexity, and therefore they would be able to achieve it. So this also we have to keep in mind as to how we are going to be making the entries in the logbook. The faculty as we have to sit together and decide in consensus what is that we're going to decide is going to be the level of achievement. Which are the criteria that we will say that, okay, if these are there, it's a satisfactory completion. We will definitely be putting numerical scores, but we should determine at what level we would consider that, yes, this is a pass score or a satisfactory score. What is going to be done if the learner does not meet the expectation? Are they going to be repeating it? If they're going to be repeating, how many times? What is the remedial training that is going to be provided? These are the factors that we have to brainstorm when we are going to be deciding how we are going to put forth our logbook. So this is also left to the institution and the department. The logbook guidelines just tell us about what is to be entered. The details of what we are going to decide on it is to be achieved through a consensus at the faculty, the institution, or the departmental level. Now, this is a template that has been provided to us in the logbook guideline, which has 8 columns. The first column tells us about the competency that is going to be addressed, and the second would be have the name of the activity, the date or when it would be done, the attempt at activity, the numerical score that we are going to give, or we have a rating, the decision of the preceptor whether it's complete, repeat, or remedial, the initial of the preceptor, and the feedback received. And here, very interestingly, it is the initial of the learner. So when the learner signs out there, it would be said that yes, they have received the feedback. So this is a template here which we can use for various activities that we are going to be having. We could have a practical, a field visit, community posting, or self-directed learning, or even EdCom. Now, let us take the words that have been used. Like if you see here, the second column, it says name of activity. Now, this also has been defined, and very clearly it's been mentioned that the activity is a predefined task. So that means it is not something that we are going to do impromptu. It is something that we define as to what we are going to make the learners perform, and it is meant with a certain purpose. Whatever we make them do should contribute to the achievement of the stated objectives or competencies. So this is would be specifically considered as an activity. Now, if you look at the other word that was there in that template, it said remedial. Now, a remedial has been given as a definition as a planned activity aimed at correcting deficits that prevent a learner from achieving an intended outcome. Now, here again, you have keywords. It's a planned activity. We just can't decide, okay, today you don't know, you didn't do it. Okay, now let us just repeat this activity, and that we'll consider that as a remedial. That's not how it would go about. We would have to see as to what prevented the learner from learning what was supposed to be learned. So why was that outcome not achieved, and why did the learner not be able to fulfill that learning that had to occur? So we have to identify that first, and we have to correct these deficits. Now suppose it was a class wherein some basic knowledge was already required, and once that knowledge was there in place and we had built on it, and then the competency was achieved. Now suppose some of these students did not have that basic knowledge, and they have directly be put they have tried to go into the complex matter, and they have not been able to understand what it is. So once we understand that okay, they had not done that basic work itself, and that is why they have not learned it. So when we are giving them the remedial, we would have to see that we go back, give them that basic work that they need to complete or understand or learn as a resource, then take them and handhold them into the next activity and see that they complete it. So it has to be very planned, and you have to aim at correcting the deficit. And to be able to correct the deficit, we have to identify the deficit that has prevented the learner. So there it becomes very important. The other word that we kept using out there was the feedback, where feedback when given to the learner would be putting it as an initial. So it's a formal active interaction performed at the completion of an observed activity or activities, and it is intended to facilitate three things. We want a positive change, so that's why it has to be very positively given and a very constructively given feedback, which will lead to growth and improvement of the learner. So at no point of time we have to degrade the saying that you didn't bother to even learn this much also you couldn't do. Look at the others, they have managed to finish. You were not attentive, that is why you didn't learn. That's not how feedback would be given. We would be looking at it in a very positive way, identify the deficit, and explain to them that yes, if you had done this and you had done this in this manner, maybe you would have got a better this. Is this you did it right till here, and maybe these steps were a little wrong, and that is why you couldn't do it. Something like that we would need to put across to the students. So that explains the terminologies of those various words that were there. Now, if you look at the next part of it, uh, it says something called as below expectation, meets expectation, or exceeds expectation. So here again, we need to understand what exactly we mean by it. So suppose we look at this entry this way. This has been given in the logbook guidelines as an example. The column number 1 was the name of the competency. Now the activity, suppose we say, is a field visit to the water purification plant. The date would be when we completed. Then we say whether it is a first attempt, a repeat attempt, or a remedial. Now, the rating that we are going to talk about, whether it is below, meets expectation or exceeds, is something that we have to decide before, like I mentioned earlier. The faculty has to say that if this is done, it is supposed to meet expectation. Anything below that would be not meeting expectation, or anything above that would be exceeds expectation. So this we have to be very clear, because it can lead to a lot of confusion, and maybe even a lot of legal issues can come up later. Decision of the faculty as to when it is completed, even this has to be entered very clearly. Now, this is just the basic format that has been given in the logbook. So if institutions have not yet started, they could look at it. This is the first page that would be there, which just tells you all about the student details and the college. This would be the certificate that would be put across in the logbook. The general instructions that would be in place, we can always add to it and modify it also as per our requirement. This is just a guideline, remember. We can modify it to suit us. Now, the most important question after this is, I have been keeping on saying that we need to decide what we are going to enter into the logbook. So what we are going to take across from here onwards is what exactly we are going to include in the logbook, and how we would demonstrate to you how exactly it would be done. So I request Dr. Paramita now to be able to come in and take the session forward from here. If you're comfortable, ma'am, I would move the slides for you,
Yes,
or
madam.
if you want, I can. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Can I?
Okay, so thank you, Hemangini madam, for a wonderful introduction to the concept of logbook. I'll just quickly take through the slides. As Hemangini madam has already discussed about the things, we'll just give some examples to highlight what should be exactly there in the context of community medicine. So what are the competencies that need to be there in the logbook? So this has already been clearly mentioned that definitely the psychomotor skills will have a place in the logbook. We have to put all the competencies which are in the shows and shows how domain, and to some extent it is up to the discretion of the instructor whether to include higher intellectual skills or not. So here is the area where we have to be very careful. So if we try to put each and every competency of the knowledge domain, then it will be too much overload. So we have to be very careful when we decide about the higher intellectual skills, which are absolutely essential, or some activities related to it. Then only we have to introduce them in the logbook for the higher intellectual skills. Then the field visit documentations, we have already been doing this from a long time, and in our department in Negrims, we are using manuals to document the field visit. All the institutions, they are doing it, but now it will be in a more of a systematic format, where we introduce document it in the form of the logbook. Then any kind of self-directed learning experiences, be it the seminars, the projects which the students are doing, any kind of survey they are doing, so this will have to be entered in the logbook. Then AdCom is another area which is very much debatable. So it is most of the time it is feasible to have a separate logbook to document the AdCom competencies, because see, the AdCom competencies, they are not demarcated subject wise. So it will be very difficult as to which competency will belong to which subject, unless the people, the instructors of the different subject, they sit together, and if they pre-decide that okay, community medicine will teach these APCOM competencies, then definitely we can enter our respective competencies in the logbook. Otherwise, it is always better to have a separate logbook for the entry of the competencies which are related to APCOM. So this entirely depends on the institution, how they find it feasible. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what are the core elements? Like Hemangini madam has already told about the template. So what do we have to determine how do we enter the things in the logbook? So what the core elements that are there are the determination of the competencies, which is the first and foremost thing to be done, that we have already discussed. Then determination of the activities. So this has to be very specifically mentioned in the logbook as to what activities will need to be done so that the competency is acquired. So this competency we can break down into the learning objectives, and then accordingly we can decide what activities will have to be done by the students so that the competency is achieved. Then the level of achievement. What will the student have to do or present so that we can say that the competency has been acquired, and what needs to be done if the level of achievement is not reached, if the student is not able to do that particular task in the first time. So what are the things that need to be done? And finally, all these things together will come in the documentation of acquisition, wherein we have already have a ready-made template which is given to us in the logbook format. Next slide, please. So let us quickly take some examples of what to enter for the community medicine competency. So I have just tried to create some examples. So let us see a skill documentation. Let us take an example. So I have just taken a competency of a nutrition related competency, which is competency number 5.4, which is plan and recommend a suitable diet for the individuals and families based on local availability of foods and economic status in a simulated environment. So the domain is skills, level is shows how. Next slide. So here, so the competency is already there. Now what are the components of this activity? How do we conduct this activity? What are the things that is required to achieve these competencies? So we have broken this up into its constituent components. So there are three components. Firstly, the student will have to plan a suitable diet for the individual based on local availability of foods and economic status in a simulated environment. So it is not in a community setting, but therefore we can take a class setting. So herein it can be taken as a group activity where a particular scenario can be given to each group by the instructor. Then in the next 30 minutes, the students will present the diet plan to the instructor, followed by a role play where the students can present the dietary plan as per what the individual can understand. In a layman's language, he or she should be able to present the dietary plan in the form of a role play. So these are the activities that has to be done for this particular competency. Next slide. Yeah. So then how do we determine that the activity has been successfully completed? So there are two things that has to be done. So these things have to be very specifically mentioned in the logbook for a better clarity of the entire picture. So the two things that have to be done are the students have to plan a dietary this plan. They have to plan the entire this dietary history they have to take, and they have to plan and then present it in the class, and then they have to give relevant advice appropriate to the context which is given by the instructor. So here numerical scoring of activity, see, it depends upon the instructor. If it is required, the instructor may give a numerical scoring, but he has to decide as to what parameter will be. If so, like suppose if a score of 5 may be taken as meets expectations, or if the score is below 5, then maybe the student may have to repeat the activity. But here I have not given any numerical scoring of the activity. So documentation in portfolio may be done, or sometimes when in undergraduate we may just keep an annexure in the logbook for documentation of this kind of activities. So here it is required wherein the student will have to submit the dietary plan to the instructor. So these are the components that has to be there when we plan the activity. Next slide. Yeah, so if the level is not achieved, what is to be done? So that also has to be very specific. Number one, if most of the students, they will usually complete it in the first task, in the first attempt only, but somehow some students might not be able to do so. So what do we do then? So we provide feedback with corrections. The feedback is very important. It has to be immediate. So we take the activity today and we give the feedback the next week, which is, so then in that way the entire purpose of logbook is not fulfilled. So we provide the feedback with corrections and we repeat the activity as early as possible. And so that is the first attempt. If after the second attempt also the student is not successful in terms of that the instructor is not satisfied that whatever the student has presented is not up to the expectation, then what can be done? The the student may review, both the instructor and the student may review, they will practice the tasks together, followed by again retaking the activity. So since this is a core competency, it has to be ensured that the instructor will have to ensure that the student fulfills all this, and he should be satisfied that okay, the student has been able to do whatever is expected of him, and then only it can be certified that it is being completed. So we have to ensure by again repeating the activity that okay, the student has fulfilled or as per the expectations of the instructor. So that is about the skill documentation. Next slide. Yes, so this has already been discussed. I will not go in again. So this is the format where we have to document. So here I have documented the competency, the activity name, the date where it has been done. So here the first attempt, the student has not been able to do it. So it is below the expectation. So here what we do, the decision of the preceptor is the student has to repeat, and then he has to sign the feedback, may be given in the column, or we can create a separate page for the skill documentation where we record everything, the components of the activity, what has been done, what remedial measures has been taken, what feedback. Ideally, everything should be documented for every competency. Now here again in the template we have to enter wherein the next day, I mean on the 21st, again this activity was again taken up, and in the next attempt it was seen that the student has met the expectation. Therefore, the preceptor has written that this competency is completed. So this is how we keep on documenting the skill competencies. Next slide, madam. Yeah, quickly about the documentation of field visit. We have been doing field visits, we have been documenting. Let us see how do we do it. So now one thing that I would like to point out here is that, see, we are continuing to do field visits, and this is a very good practice. Suppose field visit to a primary health center. So now there is no direct competency which is related to this primary visit to a primary healthcare center, but what we can do is that we can find out the competencies which are related to this visit to a primary healthcare center, and we can club these competencies so that the learning of the student is reinforced. Like here I have taken 3 competencies for the visit to a primary health center. So what we have taken is competency 17.3, describe primary healthcare. This is a knowledge component, but I feel that instead of definitely we can take a lecture to describe this competency or to teach this competency, but it can also be taught in a better way, or it can be reinforced if we take a visit to the primary health center. So that's why I have put this competency here. It can be reinforced, but entirely it is up to the instructor how he can relate the competencies. Again, another 2 competencies of the shows and shows how domain I have used, that is define, calculate and interpret demographic indices, that is birth rate, death rate, fertility rate, and calculate and interpret morbidity and mortality data indicators based on a given set of data. So here we can use the data which is there in the primary health center. Next slide, please. Yeah, so quickly the visit to, this is a group activity. So what are the components of the activity? Everything has to be very specifically mentioned. So activity is planned, then we give an orientation on the IPHS standards at the PHC, may be done before the session of the actual visit. Before the actual visit we can do this in a large group session. Then we take the learner to the centers in small groups. Usually we take them in the field posting, which is usually for 3 hours. So what do we do in these 3 hours? These thing also has to be clearly specified. Here, let us see what we have, what we will be going to do. So when the learner visits the center in small groups, what they will do? So learner understands organization, teamwork, services provided, and criteria for referral. This is the one thing that the learner should be able to do. Learner reviews the records and documents them. Learner interprets the health data provided by the instructor. So herein what they can do is that the instructor can give them some data from the primary health center records. Whatever data is available, the instructor can collect it beforehand, and on the day of the visit he can give them in groups that, okay, you interpret and calculate this particular data. Another group he gives a different set of data to calculate and interpret. So that can be taken up as a task during the field visit to the primary health center. Then learner interacts with the team members after that, and finally a debriefing of the learning done is provided. So these are the activities that ideally can be done when they go to the primary health center. And then afterwards, when the learner comes back, so they write a summary of the observation and reflection. So here a time period is allotted for that also. So they with this observation and reflection is another very critical component of this kind of field visits. So this is how we have planned the components of the activity. Next slide. Yeah, so how do we document criteria for successful completion of activity? So what do the learner have to do? They have to be present on the day of the visit. So herein again, one thing that has come up is that when the logbook has started to come, we have seen that there will be an interest will be created among the students basically to attend these field visits, because they know that these will be documented in the logbook and will be assessed at the end. So in this way, what happened is that I think there will be some amount of reinforcement for the students to be present and sincerely attend all the field visits which are there in community medicine. So this is one good thing that has come up with the introduction of the logbook. So the student have to complete this activity and document it in the logbook, get the signature of the teacher, report the findings, whatever they have done, they have to report the finding with the interpretation of the data which the instructor had given and submit to the instructor, and also submit a summary of the observations and reflections in the annexure of the logbook, or in the they have to record it in the portfolio. The numerical scoring of activity, definitely we may require it, but here I have seen that it is not required. Basically it depends on the judgment of the instructor. So documentation in portfolio, definitely it is required. Next slide. So what is the recommended action when learner is not successful? Now this is a tricky situation with field visits, especially when we do the competencies, take up the competencies in a simulated environment or in classroom setting, we can definitely retake the activity, we can repeat the activity. But when it comes to field visits, we have to see the feasibility. Like suppose if the learner has not completed the activity, or is not present, or has not been able to fulfill the expectations of the teacher, then definitely we have to provide feedback with the corrections. And if feasible, that entirely depends on the feasibility, but I suggest that if possible, we should plan another visit in the as early as possible, or if not possible, then in the subsequent posting another visit may be planned, and the activity may again be retaken, because this is again comes in another very important competencies which has to be acquired by the learner. So a repeat activity has to be planned, but that again will depend on the feasibility, how much it is feasible to go for a repeat visit. Usually in our department, we go in every subsequent posting at least one time or two times in their entire years, in the entire phase we take them to the PHC. So I think it may be feasible. Then next slide, madam. So this is again how we document the acquisition of the competency. Next slide. So documentation of the ADCOM. So here I have quickly tried to show how we document the ADCOM. So I have selected a competency from the community medicine, which is describe the role of effective communication skills in health in a simulated environment. So again, a show and shows how component. Here we can take this competency also as a integrated session in combination with other departments also. Like we can try to take the help of your general medicine. We can take it as an integrated session also. So let us quickly see again. I will, since time is limited, I'll just quickly rush through it. So the components of the activity are, here we will take one large group session, small group. Madam, next slide, wherein I think it is more clearly mentioned in the next slide. Yeah, so what do we do in the large group session? So we give an introductory lecture on the principles of communication for suppose half an hour, and a video demonstration on effective communication. Then what we do is that we divide them into the small groups and we make them do a role play. So here the students are divided into groups and given specific scenarios to enact. This will be followed by peer review of the role play and a critical appraisal and discussion. And then they will document the reflection for some time period will be given, and finally discussion and closure with emphasis on the learning done and what are the future directions. So these are the components of the activities under this EdCom competency. Next slide. Yeah, so what is the criteria for successful completion? So the student has to actively participate in the activity 1 and 2. The activity should be documented and completed and documented in the log, and they have to submit the summary of observations and reflections. So again, the same thing, numerical scoring may or may not be required, and documentation is definitely required. So this is how we keep on documenting the different competencies. So I tried to give in the examples of each of them. Next slide. Yeah, recommended action, again the same thing, I will not go into details. Providing the feedback is important, repeating the activity, and if the repeat is not successful, then what we have to do is we have to take some remedial measures. So the learner may review the video, practice the task with the instructor, and again retake the activity, which is very much essential for them to ensure that they have actually understood, gone through the process, and they have acquired the competency. Next slide. So again, the template, we enter it as usual, the competency, activity name, details of the activity may be entered in the very next page, and the date, everything. This is just the template where we quickly keep on entering the initials of the activities that has been done. Next slide. Yeah, another thing that has come up is already Hemangini madam has already explained. I will not like to go much into it. Logbook versus portfolio. Next slide. So what is the difference between logbook and portfolio? In the logbook, mainly we record the events, and portfolio is actually a collection of the evidence that learning has occurred. That is the main difference. So what is crucial in the logbook is documentation is the crucial component of the logbook, whereas the reflective component, that the student, the learning experience the student has undertaken, what the student has gone through, what went well, what the student would like to do in future to improve the learning experience, all these things when the student writes and reflects, then these things comes under the portfolio. So basically the reflective component is a crucial component in a portfolio, whereas in the logbook the documentation is a crucial component, and portfolio may contain other evidence like the achievements and other things may be highlighted in the portfolio. Now, what are the challenges we feel in the implementation of the, or in the in sustaining the logbook? So when we reflect back, even when we in our own institutions, we see that most of the faculty, they are not aware of the existence of the logbook. Even if we go and ask many people, they will say that no, we don't know, or even if they know, they are not aware of what exactly should be there in the logbook, the content, they are not aware at all. So this is one of the core challenges in implementation of the logbook, because a single faculty cannot manage the or sustain the you can say the logbook process in the department. Then documents do not match the objectives or activities planned. Then students may find it cumbersome and repetitive. This we have to be very careful. When the students have to keep on repeating the activity, okay, they will log they will document it, and every time they come for signature, they will find it very cumbersome and repetitive for them. So we have to find out an easy process for the students also. And if it is too cumbersome and repetitive, and especially for the students, then it might lead to fake documentation in the long run. Then sometimes there may be discrepancies between the learning objectives and learning experiences. So we have the competency is something else, but whatever we have offered, our learning experience is something else. So they are not matching each other. So these are some of the challenges which might come up in the long run. So next slide. So the only solution to all these challenges is that we have to plan and plan properly. Next slide. So what are the things that we have to look forward? First thing is consult all the faculty and involving the stakeholders, especially the senior people in the department have to be convinced, have to be made aware that yes, there is a logbook. These are the things that have to be there in the logbook, and it is a vital part of the curriculum. So this is a very important thing, because when the faculty members have to sit together to decide what goes into the logbook, so for that we have to consult all the faculty members. Ensure clarity of learning objectives. This has to be very clearly, we have to, so when we plan the activities, we have to be very clear about the learning objectives. So that is why we have to be clear about it. We have to make it an integral part of the curriculum. It has to be sustained throughout. It is an ongoing process. It is not a one-time process. So we have to make it an integral part of the curriculum. And the activities for the learning objective should be transparent. So we have put a lot of learning objectives, but it is not feasible for us, or we don't have the time to do the activities. So that will not be possible. So it has to be transparent, and it has to be very much feasible. Next slide, please, madam. Yeah. So the way forward, what we feel is that we have to introduce it formally. So we not only have to train the mentors. Now here again, another thing that is very important is not only the faculty, but involvement of the postgraduate students and the resident doctors is very much essential, because they are the ones who will have to monitor the students as an ongoing process. So faculty alone may not be able to sustain the process of logbook. So it is very important that we train all the mentors and the students also as to what they are supposed to do. So the process should be very much planned, the purpose, the identification of the content, the skills, the approach, the distribution system, how it will be distributed, how it will be the collection system, updating the content, review process, how the students will be involved. All these things should be very carefully planned. Then only we can go ahead with the implementation process. So with that, mostly we have come to the end of the process. Now we'll just give a quick idea about what are the assessment for the respective groups. So for the assessment assignments, actually the groups have to choose any competency from the community medicine any competency from community medicine which you think should be documented in the logbook. So we have already discussed what are the competencies that should be there. So it is up to the groups to decide which competency. They can pick any one which should be documented in the logbook, and accordingly they have to tabulate the details which are required to be entered in the logbook for the respective competency. So we already have the template. So this is the template that they have to use, but it is not that they have to just enter the initials. They have to be clearly mentioning what are the details of the activity that has been taken up for addressing the competency. Remedial measures have to be very specifically mentioned. So not just in the template, but the detailing should be mentioned when the groups are presenting in the group presentation. So this is the task that are assigned for the groups. Yeah, finally we come, yes madam. Next slide. Yeah, finally we will try to put a link. There is a very good, this is a very good study on the 12 tips for successfully implementing logbooks in clinical training. So I request all our faculty members to kindly have a look at this because they have very nicely mentioned about the different tips or the checklist that we have to keep in mind for successfully implementing logbooks into our curriculum. So we can all have a look through it, and we will also put the link in the Google Classroom. So I think, yeah, with that, so these are the 12 tips. With that, we have come to the end of today's presentation, and now we are ready to move to the questions. So I request Hemangini Madam to kindly just look into the question answer session and to highlight, just to read out the questions. Yes, Hemangini Madam, are you there?
Yes, I'm just opening the questions here.
Okay, I'll also open them.
Some of them have been answered. Here there is a question by Dr. Delia D'Souza. It says, how do we verify that the activity was done?
How do we verify
Hello?
that okay, madam.
Activity was done.
Yeah, definitely for that, definitely the mentor should be always going with the students. So verification means as the students are doing the activity, someone should be always there. Like suppose when we go for the field visits, the mentor has to be present. When they are presenting the assignments, the mentor has to be present. So this is with direct observation is the way that we verify whether the activity has done. I hope that is what she was asking. Would you like to comment, madam, on this or any other faculty?
Basically, we need good supervision. That is why, like you said, we have to increase our manpower by trying to get in more of the senior residents and the postgraduate students. All places do not have senior residents, but at least postgraduate students should be taken up to be able to help out.
Yes. So herein lies the importance of using our postgraduate students as well as our resident doctors, because it will be a continuous ongoing monitoring activity.
Yes, I was. Can we replace record with logbook, or is it good to keep them separately? This is also a query that has come up by Venam Bodhi. Can we replace record with logbook, or is it good to keep them separately? She means, I think, the existing record book that they may be using.
Yes, yes, madam. So that is entirely up to the department if they can maintain the record separately and the logbook, but the documentation in the logbook is very crucial actually. So I think if it is feasible, it can be combined as annexure. The record part can be combined as annexures in the logbook so that it becomes a comprehensive record rather than maintaining parallel records, because that might lead to duplication of the records. Uh, any other comments from other faculties, or Hemangini madam, please?
Ma'am, I think over here it's better to have the logbook separate, and the record, instead of replacing it, can be sort of used as a portfolio. So
Yes,
that would help them, maintain it separate, because the logbook will have to be submitted, whereas the portfolio will remain with the student.
yes,
So
yes.
since they have to submit the logbook, it is better that it is maintained separately.
Okay, madam.
There any other? Many of them are similar questions as to, do we replace the existing system or do we add on, have it separate? Any other question that you could check, ma'am?
Madam, one question is very much I have seen by Dr. Prasad Pore. Isn't there is subjectivity in mentioning remark as meet expectations or below expectations or above? How to make it more objective? This is a very nice question that has come up. Yes, so there has been some subjectivity, but herein I think it is up to the instructor if he uses some kind of parameters. What are the criteria that meets expectations, or what are the criteria that will be below expectations. Some kind of parameters has to be set by the instructors or by the departments. Then we can bring in more objectivity to it. Just by observing or just by your own judgment, we cannot rate it as meet expectations or below expectations. That will be highly subjective, but some kind of objectivity definitely has to be there in terms of setting of some your criteria or parameters. This is what I feel to make it more objective. Any comments from other facilitators? Yeah, Dr. Parag.
Thank you, Prasad sir, for this question. But two aspects I would like to mention. One is that I would not completely wish everything to be very objective when it comes to assessment, especially formative assessment, when we talk about it in logbook. So subjectivity, if it's there, it's fine, provided that the examiner is trained in assessment, or the examiner is senior, or the teacher is senior. Second thing is, in the earlier sessions on assessment, we have touched upon the topic of standard setting. So that very crudely means that whenever we decide those levels, how do we define with what level of performance meets assessment? We can have a departmental meeting, and all those teachers, be it residents or assistant professors or tutors, we can have some kind of consensus among the faculty members who are going to teach, so that there is a little bit kind of a uniformity as to what is expected, and also a little bit of clarity among all the teachers, uniform clarity among teachers as to what is expected from student in this particular activity. So I guess that's what I feel about this.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Parag. Yeah, very well said, actually.
Pankaj.
Yes, sir, please.
Yes, sir,
Pankaj,
please
sir.
come in.
Madam, this is, I really want to congratulate both of you for taking us to an uncharted sea, which we have not seen, and we are among the first people who have gone through that uncharted sea as the first people. The only thing I want to comment, many times when this documentation or logbook comes, we get too much energy involvement in documentation rather than actual doing things. So the subjectivity, no doubt, will be there, but the subjectivity can be as minimized possible if we look at the competencies are acquired or no. If the students are acquiring the competencies and then we are looking at the documentation, then the purpose will serve. But otherwise, what will happen? Everybody will go into documentation, and lot of energy will go to documentation. Finally, will follow the logbooks of the student rather than the student themselves. So that kind of thing should not happen. Our aim is to follow that competencies are acquired and then document them in the logbook.
Very well said, sir. It's very correct. Also, for the same reason, we say that select only very few competencies. Do not try to put in lots of things into the logbook right in the beginning and try to, then we will be only documenting all the time. And at the end of it, the whole purpose may not be solved. Uh, it would be like, the learning would be taking a backseat, and like sir said, we would be only bothered about the documentation. So select competences very judiciously with the consensus and start with few. Even if you do 2-3 is more than enough in the first phase, and then you can, go ahead to the next phases. That is what we feel.
Madam, one more thing, if I just take 1 more minute. It was a very excellent program which is developed by the government college, I think Bhavnagar, if I'm not wrong, and Parag
Yes,
and
sir.
other people, yourself and many were involved in that. But many
Yeah.
times when we start this IT-based technology, we are always worried about who will guide them, the technical complexity and the money involved. If you see today, module 8 is released by the NMC, which
Yes.
talks about online learning and assessment. It talks about online logbook also, and simple Google form where there is an attachment facility by the student can begin with the logbook, and we can move forward as we move on. We don't have to worry too much about those resource related things.
Yeah, and it can also have confidentiality issues. In the logbook also, we got to remember we can have legal issues that can come in. So if you read that article on 12 tips, that takes you very well into the intricacies of the logbook. So I suggest you all read that in detail, where lots of various aspects are taken care of in that, where we need to pay attention.
Yeah, madam. There is one more very nice question by Dr. Venam Bodhi. The question is regarding clinico-social cases and family health studies. Students write after attending the case or family. Shall we keep them separate with logbook? I think the question is, shall we keep them with the logbook or shall we separate it out? So, what do you think, or other facilitators would like to come in? Regarding the clinico-social and family health studies, do we?
Can I answer that?
Yes, Parag,
Yes,
please.
sir.
Yes. What I feel is the existing, it's not that we are not doing anything with regard to individualized or group-based teaching for students. So a lot many activities are already happening. All of, as previously mentioned, that record books, manuals, journals, we name, call it by different names, where the students are writing something which reflects that the student has performed something or done something, did some intellectual exercise and come out with some performance. So all those things which we are currently doing will continue to be used and continue to be used within the department. So be it family study or clinical posting, record book, manual, or log, or whatever different name we call it. So we'll continue to use them. Logbook is just one more addition to it, wherein it's there with a separate format. And a logbook will not be a very thick book, as I understand it, because we are keeping very selected competencies in them. So that's my answer. That will continue to use whatever we are using currently.
Parag,
Yes, sir.
just to reconfirm if I'm correct with thinking, a logbook will merely act as an index of all the activities which are going to recorded in the record book with the competency acquired, the formative assessment, and the remedial and other details. It is going to be act as a mere index of all the activities which are going to be recorded in the record book. Please correct me. Anybody can correct me if
Yes, sir.
Yes,
To my
sir.
understanding, yes, sir. This is very true that it would be like an index. So, but Srividya madam has also asked whether it will be called as a portfolio. So, I also see that since the format is there and there is very little scope that we can mention more details of the activities on the logbook. Probably that's not required. So, if we are maintaining something separate already within the department, so that can continue and logbook can work as only an index.
Yeah, but one thing I would like to add here is like if the reflective component is there as an annexure to the logbook, then maybe it will add to the value of the logbook rather than just the documentation part, because we have the reflective component also, like when they go for field visits or any kind of crucial your skill that they have to do. If there is some kind of reflective component as an annexure to the logbook, and since we don't have many competencies also in community medicine, I think that will add to the value of the logbook. Yeah.
As
Any
colleges
other?
move ahead, slowly they would, take shape, and we would learn from each other's experiences. So various institutes can share their experiences later, maybe, and it will evolve. It's an evolving process. So I think right now we just have to take a consensus and start off, and then maybe it can be modified with every year that we go ahead.
Madam, there is one question about the visit to filtration plant. It says that if the visit gets cancelled, what do we do?
Then I think if the visit gets cancelled, then we need not take it as, we need not document it in the first place. The day when we actually go to visit the plant, that is the day when we document it. Means we need not document it prior to the day of the visit or the thing. We document it once we have completed the visit. So I think that issue should not come up of the cancellation aspect, because we document
Parag,
once we have activity. Yes.
Parag.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, just again for reconfirmation and re-looking at with a different angle. If I am not wrong, there are approximately 16 skills which are identified in the community medicine volume 2 document at present, and we go with the integration, I think it becomes a competency. Now, in such a scenario, I don't think so everything is possible, but we need to document only the skill. So now, if suppose that filtration plant visit, so-called visit, has a competency which I have to acquire as a student and become the mandatory as by the department, the institution, if the visit gets cancelled, it should make an alternative arrangement to acquire me that competency. But if I feel out of those 16, filtration plant is not that important. I'm just giving an example. If it's not important, it's not fitting in those 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 essentials, then I need not worry too much about the cancellation of the field visit. But if it becomes among those priority lists, then it has to be made rearrangement. That is my other way of looking at it, because all 16 and all 40 cannot be logged together in the beginning.
Thank you, Pankaj, Pankaj sir, for clarifying this. I mean, once again brings us to that discussion of the legal issues, since whatever we log in would be a permanent record for the student's achievement of performance. So we probably preferentially should be including those competencies which we feel are very important.
I would like to share at this juncture, Dr. Parag, and thanks, Dr. Himangini and Dr. Himashri. Am I audible, Dr. Parag?
Yes,
Yes,
Amit.
sir.
Actually, what from the queries, the things that are coming up, that when this question is asked, that if this visit is cancelled, then what? And I was reading the questions and I found there was one question: should we document the activities or should we document the competencies? So we will have to look at the whole thing in this perspective, that what was there before CBME and what is there after CBME. Community medicine teaching was there before CBME, and students were learning community medicine, and community medicine faculty was teaching community medicine, and that will continue even in 2019, 2020, and in future. So first of all, community medicine teaching continues. What has changed is uniformity. We are trying to bring uniformity by CBME. Before 2019, everybody had its own way, their own things. What is the objective? What are the activities? What are the things? What the student goes out with after completing the community medicine postings, that was very much that will, I would say, depending upon which college the student is in. But now with this CBME, an attempt is made to make it structured and uniform, specifically uniform, that whether a student enters in a medical college in UCMS, or whether a student enters in a medical college in Bhavnagar, or whether a student enters in some other medical college in Assam, all the students, if pursuing MBBS course, then the competencies achieved by all, the effort will be there to give those competencies to those students. So the main thing which becomes is now not activity, but the competency become more important. So now we have to focus everything whether competency has been achieved or not. So activities become take second step, a second seat in the meaning that you can use various activities to achieve a particular competency. The activities may vary from college to college, from time to time, but the competencies that we all have to achieve should be the same. Now, so that is why when we say that in the past we were taking the students for field visit, water, filtration and purification, that this particular thing, and hygiene and all those things. So there at that time we did not have some learning objectives or competencies, and that was varying between colleges. So now we have, so we have to put competencies there. So now from 2019 onwards, anything that we do our objective should be, our focus should be which competency or which objective related to which competency am I achieving or is my student achieving through that activity. So I think even with the logbook thing, whatever things are being written, done, the focus will be on which competency is being achieved. If a visit is cancelled, some competencies may not be achieved for those particular students. Maybe we need to achieve those competencies by some other method, maybe by that can be decided, but the focus should be that we can't say that a student leaves the medical college without having certain competencies fulfilled because of certain things that happened. Maybe student did not attend, or maybe this happened also. Some certain things will be, till now it was not there, till now it was only focused on certain things. So now the attempt is made, and certification in community medicine, certification skills are not there, but in certain other places are there. But I think as we move ahead, more and more we will get we will understand competencies more and try to implement it. We will have to make it ensure that so many competencies. So logbook is one important method by which we are documenting not the activities. Activities are the second. Activities you can do many things, but which competencies are being achieved in which ways you are document, and the teacher is taking accountability of that, that I am writing on that yes, this student has achieved this competency. So I think we need to look at it in a broader picture every time, that focus should be on competency. Every medical student getting competent in those competencies or not? Thank you. Sorry to be too detailed.
Thank you, sir. I think we are now coming to the end of the session. Any final remarks by Manjunath sir or Dr. Animesh or any other co-faculty? We would just wait for their comments, or any suggestion or opinion that they have. Manjunath sir?
Good evening, madam. Can you hear me,
Good
madam?
evening. Yes, sir.
First of all, congratulations to both of you, madam, for making this session a very productive and useful one for all of us. I will just say one sentence because everything has been covered so nicely and comprehensively by you people. I will just say, let us look at the logbook as a means to an end rather than an end in itself. That is the only sentence take home message from my side, madam. Thank you. Thank you.
Very well said, sir. That sums up everything. So
Yes.
I thank, thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry, I think I referred to you as Dr. Paramita when I called you in, but I got a little distracted. Dr. Himashri, ma'am.
No problem, madam. No.
Yeah. Thank you so much to all the participants for their active participation, the co-facilitators for giving us their valuable inputs, and we enjoyed creating the session for you. And we can continue the discussion on the WhatsApp group if there is anything. Just remember one thing, that it is an evolving process. There are a lot of open-ended questions which we would slowly try and get into a structured format. So thank you, everyone. Have a good dinner, and we look forward to more participation for the next sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.